At the beginning of 2022, there were almost 300 million migrants in the world, 1 in every 30 inhabitants of the Earth, and those forced, including the ones internally displaced, were more than 89 million, a number that rose to over 100 million in May of the same year, especially after the war in Ukraine. The 32 conflicts around the world, together with the effects of the COVID pandemic and environmental disasters linked to climate change, represent 3 of the key factors in understanding the current migration. It is estimated that by 2050, environmental migrants alone could reach 220 million, while the economic gap between the north of the world, where 1 in every 6 inhabitants of the planet who enjoys almost half of the world's wealth lives, and the south of the world, where the per capita GDP is 4 times lower than that of rich countries, keeps increasing. In this context, the European Union, despite the serious shortages of foreign labor that the pandemic has induced in many vital sectors of the economy and the critical conditions of those seeking protection, has maintained both the closure of legal entry channels for foreign workers and the refugee pushback policy. Therefore, it is not surprising that illegal entries into the Union rose to almost 200,000 in 2021. Over half of them occurred across the Mediterranean, where nearly 25,000 deaths were ascertained between 2014 and 2022. The central route is again the most common, with almost 67,700 arrivals, and together with the route of the Western Balkans, with 61,600, it covers 2/3 of the total crossings in 2021. At the same time, it is also confirmed as the most dangerous of the sea routes, with more than 1/3 of migrants departing from Libya never arriving to Italy or Malta. The increase in flows has also raised the number of asylum applications presented in the European Union, 633,000, 1/3 more than in 2020, of which 184,000, 3 out of 10, concerning minors. Of the more than 524,000 applications examined throughout the Union in 2021, 38.5% received a positive response already in the first instance, while 34.8% of the 208,000 followed up in the appeal were positive. In Italy, 53,600 asylum applications were submitted, and about 52,000 were examined, of which 42% received a positive response, divided equally between recognition of refugee status, subsidiary protection, and special protection. In 2022, Italy also welcomed 154,000 Ukrainian refugees, offering 80% of them some form of public assistance. But in 9 out of 10 cases they were hosted, not without bureaucratic complications, by compatriots, private citizens, or third sector entities, while less than 1/10 were accepted in the institutional reception system. The 37.4 million foreigners residing in the European Union in 2021 are concentrated in the 4 major EU immigration countries. Germany with 70%, which hosts 10,600,000, Spain with almost 5,400,000, France and Italy, respectively, with little more and just under 5,200,000. In Italy, they account for just under 9% of the total population, and almost 50% of them are Europeans, more than half of whom are members of the European Community, followed with shares of over 20% each by Asians and Africans, while Americans are 1 every 13. The first communities cover almost half of the total, with the Romanians, who with 1,100,000 citizens precede the more than 430,000 Albanians and almost as many Moroccans, the 330,000 Chinese and 236,000 Ukrainians. Of the 3,561,000 non-EU citizens legally residing in Italy, up by 188,000 compared to 2020, 2 out of 3 have a permanent resident permit. Among the remaining 1,200,000 with a fixed-term permit, the 517,000 present for family reasons remain the most numerous. But the 419,000 for work have risen to over 1/3, above all thanks to the 39,000 workers regularized in the year, and the 181,000 for protection to about a seventh, also due to the 67,400 migrants landed in Italy. As of March 2022, of the 207,500 regularization applications submitted by employers in mid-2020, 2 out of 5 had yet to be examined, and only 55,200 had resulted in the issue of a work permit. For decades, the employment integration of immigrants has obeyed a model of job segregation that rigidly channels them towards less skilled, more precarious, less paid, and more dangerous professions, with very little occupational mobility even for those with higher education and many years of activity. After the collapse of regular employment in 2020, foreign workers rose to 2,300,000, 10% of all employed in Italy. But at the same time, the unemployed also increased, reaching 379,000 and 16% of the national total. The most penalized are women, who account for only 42% of the employed and a good 52% of the unemployed. Almost 2 out of 3 foreign workers are employed in low-skilled jobs, a double share compared to Italians, among which a quarter is overeducated, while among the former they rise to a third. In addition, 1 out of 5 foreign workers is involuntary part-time, compared to just 1/10 of Italian workers. The branches of employment continue to remain a few and rigidly divided not only between men and women, but also between individual nationalities, so that foreign workers account for 1/7 in construction, and in the hotel-restaurant sector, 1/5 in agriculture, and even 2/3 in family services, where as many as 2/5 of foreign workers work, while a similar share of males is concentrated in industry and construction. And if self-employment represents an alternative to these dynamics, albeit partial, with immigrant-run businesses continuing to grow, it is significant that the increased judicial investigations against labor exploitation have concerned for as many as 81% of 391 cases, with certain nationality of the victims precisely foreign workers, especially asylum seekers. In this context, it is not surprising that immigrants are subjected to heavy dynamics of exclusion also on the social level. In 2021, out of a total of 5,600,000 people in absolute poverty, 3 out of 10 were foreigners, or 1,600,000, about a third of all those residing in the country. Yet among the 2,460,000 beneficiaries of the citizen income, there are only just over 306,000, which is 12%. Poverty also reverberates on the living conditions of immigrants, forcing them to fall back, especially into large urban areas, in poor quality 1 or 2 room apartments, on average 55 square meters, and in over 9 out of 10 cases in peripheral districts or in decentralized municipalities, physically increasing their marginalization. 65% of foreigners in Italy still rent, while only a fifth are homeowners, compared to 80% of Italians. The rest is divided between those who stay in the workplace, including many domestic workers, and those with relatives or compatriots, sometimes overcrowded. It is precisely the social inequalities which worsened during the pandemic and added to the reductions in admissions from abroad and the contraction in births, and have contributed for the first time to a decrease in foreign students in schools, who during the 2020 to 2021 school year amounted to 865,400, or 10.3% of the total. In contrast, those born in Italy rose to 577,000, and to 66.7% of all foreign students. The high school choices of the latter, massively channeled towards technical and professional institutes, together with the progressive thinning of their presence as the level of education rises, is an indication not only of the persistent difficulties of the younger generations to remain in the training circuit, but also of their widespread risk of not being able to compete for highly qualified professions, therefore having to undergo the dynamics of occupational segregation and social subordination already experienced by their parents. The Statistical Dossier on Immigration, now in its 32nd edition, is still intended today as a tool to contribute, through the correct knowledge of a complex and decisive phenomenon such as migration, to the construction of a more open, egalitarian, and livable society for all.